What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the show. Glad to have you guys here. It is Dog Talk with your host, Holden, and we are fired up for another episode here. Listen, I'm repping the Braves right off of the start of this thing. If you guys are watching on YouTube, the Braves wrapping up their sixth straight year winning a division. Winning the division 6 straight years. Awesome for the Braves. So had to rep the jersey or had to rep the shirt tonight for that. Excited for that to happen for the Braves last night. And the other exciting thing is the fact that I don't think that's happened since like 2002 or 2003, that we've done it as soon as we have, this year. I mean, the Dogs are on fire. The Braves are on fire. It's got a lot of remnants of just a couple of years ago when Georgia won the first of the back-to-back national champions, and the Braves won the World Series that year too. That was an exciting year. Can we repeat it? Can we repeat that kind of year? I don't know, but we're on really good pace to do that in both facets. Listen, we're still early in this season. It's getting late in the Braves season, but it's early in Georgia's season. But, hey, I'm glad to have you guys here. And let's kind of go ahead and jump into some of the news and notes before we start previewing this one. The first thing that I want to talk about, and that's just because it's something that's being talked about around the country right now, that's Stetson Bennett and the LA Rams. It came out yesterday that Stetson Bennett has been not released, but he has been put on a non-football injury-related reserve, I think is the word that they use there. I don't know what's going on, and I'm not going to speculate. I'm not going to sit here and say what I think's going on or anything like that. I think in times of need, we're just meant to lift each other up more than we are tear each other down. So I think that's what we need to do in this moment. Don't know what he's dealing with, and not that I don't care what he's dealing with, but I don't care to see a bunch of other people speculating what he's going through. So instead of tearing somebody down, let's lift him up and hope that everything, starts to kind of turn around for him, whatever it is that's going on there. Because, again, I don't know it. You don't know it. It ain't came out yet, so let's just quit speculating on it. But hope everything turns out okay there with Stetson over in LA. This is what we got on tap this week. Dogs are playing South Carolina. That game's happening at 3:30 on CBS. At the end of the last episode, we played this sound. It's so exciting it's kind of exciting, I should say, anyway, that we get to hear this. It's weird right now turning things on and seeing the Big Ten in this position where they're getting the love for these. I don't even think it's necessarily a 3:30 game, but seeing the love and this sound playing, and then a Big Ten game playing, just it really kind of blows my mind a little bit. But we get to hear this nonetheless. Again, I don't think it's necessarily going to be the last time that we hear this, but this is going to be the first time we hear it this season anyways, and that's kind of an exciting thing. I'm looking forward to that. The timing did come out. They did release the schedule for next week's game. Georgia will be getting another night game in Sanford. We're going to be playing 7:30. I think it's on ESPN2. Could have this information wrong. It could be at 7 o'clock. It could be on ESPNU, but I'm fairly certain it's ESPN2 at 7:30. If I'm wrong, feel free to leave it in the comments below or tweet at us. But anyway, that's a UAB. I was for sure that was going to simply be a 12 o'clock kick. I was like, oh, yeah, this is simple. We're going to play UAB at 12 o'clock. No big deal. That's just what we've grown accustomed to. And lo and behold, we get another night game. I guess it's because Georgia's schedule is so easy this year as far as the beginning goes. We start to get those night games. I was kind of hoping later in the season when we have, we're hosting, like this week would have been cool, hosting South Carolina. Later on when we host Ole Miss, those would be the kind of games where you want that bigger atmosphere. Maybe we still get that. I don't know. I have not seen if TV scheduling has come out that far in advance for those games. But nonetheless, hey, it's another night game atmosphere, which is always fun in Sanford. Excuse me, I'm stuck on Stetson and Sanford and trying to get Stanford out there. But anyways, speaking of atmospheres, that's been a big talking head as we've gotten into the week. Kirby kind of put the message out there that there was one South Carolina fan who the question was brought to him, the South Carolina player, doesn't think that Georgia is one of the loudest stadiums there is that he's ever played in. Part of the reason is I don't know that he's ever played in Sanford. The second part of that is the question was kind of incorrectly asked because it's not that he said Georgia is not. He just didn't mention Georgia in it, and I don't think it necessarily needed to be brought up the way that it was. But regardless, hey, it was. You get the call from Kirby. Let's get the fans in here. Let's be loud. I'm not really worried about that because the times I've gone, it's been plenty loud enough, and it's loud enough. Okay, it doesn't have to be the loudest stadium there is out there, but I think it's plenty loud, and it's exciting when all the dogs are in there making the noise that they are. It's a great atmosphere, but we cannot lie to ourselves and say in the UAB game by the third quarter, half of the stadium is not starting to empty when it's 51-0. So it until we have a game where that atmosphere sticks around the entire game, I don't know. I love it that at least these night games, it's getting later. People are enjoying being there. But I know these lunchtime kicks, most of the time by third quarter, especially fourth quarter, that stadium starts to look really empty. It kind of looks like Texas A&M and Miami last week, where that stadium is just not full. And that was the beginning of the game for them. But hopefully we can kind of keep that rocking for Georgia, at least in this season. Not only 3:30 kick against South Carolina this week, which we're previewing now, but also when we play that night game then. Kind of getting into some of the injury updates that we've got here. Kendall looks good. Look forward to seeing him back in here. Dejon Edwards, we should finally get to see him back unless something has come out today that I have not seen, which is always possible. Listen, I'm busy. This is not what I do all day, every day. I do this in the evenings on Thursday to get you guys prepped for Friday's show. That way you guys can get all of this information in before we play on Saturdays, and then I do it on the recapping of everything. I do that on Sunday afternoon. So this is not my full-time job. I just do this to entertain you guys, and I enjoy doing it. I hope you guys enjoy it as well. But hopefully we'll get to see Dejon this weekend. It sounds like we're there. It sounds like we could have had him 2 weeks ago. Could have even had him last week if we needed him, but there's no point in putting him on the field if we don't necessarily have to. But it sounds like we're going to get to see Dejon this week, which is awesome. I doubt we see Ladd again, unless something's broken and I haven't seen it. I don't think we're going to see Ladd. Even listening to the early week presser, or even Wednesday, I didn't hear anything that led me to believe we're going to see him. I know that it's a day-to-day is what we say, and that's what's been being said. It's going to be day-to-day, and that could mean, hey, when Saturday comes, if his back's feeling okay, we'll put him out there on the field. I really don't know. I'm more optimistic that we'll see him later in the season, not so much right now. And I think that's okay. I think it's okay that if we don't see him here in these first couple of weeks, we would much rather see Ladd later in the season healthy than we would early in the season not as healthy, and he just kind of continues a trend all season long where he's not 100% healthy. That's one thing I don't want us to see is a 80% Ladd and then trickling between 70, 60, 80% throughout the season. I'd rather not have him for the first few weeks and have 100% Ladd once we get him later into the season. Does it stink without him? Yes, but this is a great opportunity for the guys around him to grow, to step up. That next man up. My goodness, can't talk tonight. Next man up mentality is what we've got to have, and it gives us the opportunity to have that with the guys who are having to step up in his position. That gives you more weapons down the line. That gives you more guys to be able to go to and spread the ball to when we get in games that matter more than a UAB that you're going to get next week. We're opening up SEC play against South Carolina this weekend, so I don't want to take a lot away from them, even though the past couple of meetings have been very lopsided in Georgia's favor. But we're not going to take anything away from them. But, again, these couple of games we played at the start of the season, it's understandable. One of the last ones is Javon Bullard. I'm putting him like on a doubtful list. I know Kirby has said in the past there have been players who have had that sprained ankle and they have come back the next week. I don't anticipate that being the case. One, because Javon is a high-caliber football player. He is a guy who's definitely going high in draft pick when the time comes for him, and I don't think that you want to risk the injury just to get him back quickly when, again, I think if it takes him 3 weeks to get back and we don't see him until we get back into SEC play after UAB, I think that's okay. But I doubt we see Javon this week. If we do, hey, okay, they know more than we do. That's all I can say on that, and Kirby will tell you that in pressers too. You guys like to think that you know more than you actually do. And he's right, so we'll just leave that up to them if we see him. But I'm at least putting him on a doubtful list. So, hey, I appreciate you guys being here. If you guys are watching on YouTube, make sure you hit that like button. Follow us over on Instagram at DogTalk20 and Twitter, X, formerly Twitter anyways. Follow us there. Same thing at DogTalk20. If I sniffle a little bit, whatever it is, go coughing in here. I mowed some grass earlier. And it's just that time of year where it starts to kind of bug the senses and everything. But I greatly appreciate you guys being here, whether you're listening on podcast, whether you're watching on YouTube. And if you're not watching on YouTube, again, you're missing out. Make sure you guys go over and check the YouTube channel. I greatly appreciate it. Let's go ahead and get into this Georgia versus South Carolina preview. All right. Getting into things here. Last couple of meetings, like I said, really been a lopsided kind of a ball game. Georgia on the upper side of both of these, which I'm really excited about. The last two meetings, let's go back to 2021, 40-13 Georgia's way last season, 48-7 on the road at South Carolina. The year before that, we go to 2020, 45-16 at South Carolina. So the last three meetings between Georgia has been very lopsided in Georgia's favor. Georgia is favored very heavily this week, too. I'm not going back to that 2019 game. We're stopping right there. I don't want to go that far back because if I go back to 18, we can look at another lopsided score, but I don't want to do that. I want to keep things positive where we've been the past couple of years because the team of 2019 is nothing like the team of 2023. So there's a big difference in those two football teams, especially where we are right now. Since that time, Georgia has won 2 national championships, back-to-back, by the way, if you guys didn't know that already. But the past couple of meetings have been heavily leaning towards Georgia's way. Some of the things that I kind of want to talk about with DeJean coming back this week, how are we going to run the football? A couple of things that I did want to kind of talk about is Georgia has started strong. You know, we've talked about first half of football games has been slow. Doesn't mean it hasn't been strong. Again, first half of the game against UT Martin starting the season, slow start, understandable, end up strong, okay? Same thing last week. First quarter, not the fastest start, but again, we only had 2 possessions, one of which should have had points, didn't get points out of it. The second possession, yes, we didn't move the ball as effectively as we did the first time, but nonetheless, you only have the ball twice. It's really hard. If we'd have put up 7 points on that quarter, you'd have still thought we started slow, but at least we got points on the one of 2 possessions. That's 50% out of the time that we had the ball in that quarter to actually score. That's pretty successful in that vein, at least looking at it in that way. But we have started strong. These first couple of games into the season, we have started strong. Points for, we've scored 93 points. We've held other teams to 10. Points per game, we're sitting at 46.5 right now. So if you would have looked at the start of the season and you get 3 weeks in and all of a sudden you're griping about, well, man, Georgia just seems to be starting real slow. And then you look at the points per game, you're 15th in the country sitting at 46.5. It's like, what are you talking about? As somebody who's not necessarily following Georgia, who's listening to this and they're just looking at that statistic alone, it's like, what do you mean? You're 15th in the country, 46.5 points a game is what you're scoring right now. How could you possibly feel like you're starting slow? Us that are watching it and we're critiquing every little thing, look at that, and that's the reason we think that. But on the outside looking in, Georgia is just fine, and we are starting very strong. Opponents' points per game is also at 5, which is number 3 in the country. A lot of these have ties like that. That'll be something that is kind of tied with a bunch of other teams in the country. And some of the other statistics that I was looking at as well earlier that I don't know if I can actually pull up on here. At the moment, I can't. But some of the other statistics that I was looking at, you know, there's multiple teams, like turnovers, I think was one. Offensively, we only have 1 so far on the season, and that's like 10th in the country, but there's a ton of teams that are in that same spot. Same thing when it goes to actually receiving turnovers on defense. There's a ton of teams that are kind of sitting in same ranking. So until you get deeper into the season, some of those are not really going to fluctuate or change a lot until that actually happens. But right now, you got to be pretty happy with the fact you're scoring almost 47 points a game and you're only giving up 5. That's not too bad in a football game, I'd say. Again, that's a 41-point swing right there. Georgia comes into this game, and this will be the first test Saturday, I do believe. This is not necessarily meaning that this is going to be a hard test. This should be a test that you know a lot about. Georgia, I think, coming into this knows a lot what South Carolina has been, but also what South Carolina is so far through this season. South Carolina only having a couple of matchups so far, North Carolina being one of those who I'm still not sure about. I'm not. I think North Carolina looked good against South Carolina. I thought South Carolina would come out a little bit more prepared in that football game, and that didn't really happen. But then North Carolina, kind of struggled last week, and I started to go, okay, well, does that mean that North Carolina maybe isn't that good, or does that mean South Carolina is not really that good? And I don't know. I think this is where we get that head-to-head matchup. We get to determine, okay, that football team is or is not good. We get to make that assumption following this game. But leading into it, we don't know. Don't know what you're coming into. Again, SEC play is different than just playing a UT Martin, than playing a MAC team at a Ball State too. So I think that's one of the things that we need to kind of prepare ourselves and look at as we kind of come into this. So, on one of the other stats and pages of this into the preview. Georgia right now is averaging almost 475 yards total on the game. Through the air, we're putting right up about 345, and on the ground right around 130. I'm averaging most of these up either a couple of yards or really just one in most. Averaging 2 touchdowns through the air and 3 on the ground right now, which is kind of wild because when we look at the statistics as far as like rushing leaders on the team, Roderick Robinson leads that at 88 and 2 touchdowns on the ground. So it's just kind of weird when you look at some other teams probably have running backs that have 200 and 300 yards by now. Wideouts for Georgia, the leading one right now for wide receivers at least, it's Mekhi Muse at 102 yards. South Carolina's main guy, he's got almost 300 yards receiving. I think a lot of this is because here lately Georgia has done a very good job of spreading the ball out to multiple guys. One of those is when you're not getting the ball out to Brock Bowers in last week, how that went, 1 touch for 3 yards, you're having to spread the ball out to many other guys. And then not having Lab McConkey in there, not having him be healthy, not quite having some of these other wideouts ready. And I'm not going to say necessarily ready, which I just did, obviously, but not quite up to where the standard is yet. They still have to get touches to get to that point. So we're spreading the ball out a lot through the air right now to different guys. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have one guy with 300 yards like a guy coming into the South Carolina game has, but that means we have multiple guys who have multiple yards kind of coming into things here. I'm curious, with DeJohn coming back here, how are we going to run the football? How are we going to run the football? Again, we're averaging 129 rushing yards per game right now. How are we going to look rushing the ball? I'm curious if that number will start to go up. One thing that I've heard a lot of people talk about, and it's very true, is we don't have a lot of pop right now when it comes to the running back room. And by pop, I don't mean putting a Roderick Robinson in there and running somebody over kind of pop. No, I'm talking about a guy in like Dylan Bell last week who, when he came into the game, he was really flashy. And it wasn't that he's doing all these things that make you go, man, that's a cool dude. No, I'm not talking about that kind of flashy. I'm talking about when he got the ball, it was like that dude can fly. Not only is he fast, but he's shifty. He made a couple of moves on one of the runs that he had last week that it was shifty. I think DeJohn brings a lot of that to the table. He can run a guy over too, but I think he can have that kind of explosivity that we want to see where these guys are really kind of lighting up the field and we're going, oh, okay, all right, that's the running back we're missing. I think that Kendall Milton is that guy too. We just haven't seen it yet this season. Part of that, I think, is because he's not been 100%, so I'm not going to take that away from him. I hope that he can kind of get to that point where he's like in years past, I'm blanking again. Of course, I blank on names every week. But in years past, like just went in the draft, just left. Can't think of his name. It'll come to me either when I finish this or at the end of it, and I'll go back to it. But anyways, I'd love to see Kendall step up in that way. DeJohn, again, I think he can bring a lot of lightning. I hope we get to see that, that thunder and lightning kind of deal. I'd love to see that come into this game. But I'm also kind of curious, does Dylan Bell line back up there again? If DeJohn isn't quite where we need him to be, or if we're needing a little bit of lightning on that offense coming out of the running back room, do we slip Dylan back in there? Do we put him back there and kind of give him some more touches and just see what happens? I don't know. But if he has that explosivity that we're looking for on the offensive side of the ball, on the ground at least, so we're not becoming one-dimensional and relying on Carson to find guys open. And it's not that he can't. It's just that you don't want to become one-dimensional. It makes things very difficult on an offense if your defense or the team against you's defense is easily able to keep you one-dimensional. So curious to see if we'll see him in there. Mekhi Muse, I'm curious to see if he's going to continue that dominance as well, or if teams start to kind of lean his way. The good thing is if teams start to lean his way on others, you got other guys who are going to come open. And you can never forget about Brock Bowers. And I don't think they do. I think one good thing is you're going to see a lot of attention on Brock Bowers, which gives other guys opportunities. It's that selflessness of being a true teammate and being a true team player, saying, hey, if I take the double team, so what? Somebody out there has to be open for us to be able to throw the ball to. I want to see those blocking issues from weeks past also kind of cleaned up that are on the perimeter in these wideout positions, holding on to blocks longer so that way when we do get these runs around the edge, we're able to make something happen. Right now, we're not doing the best job as far as the push on the O-line through the center. We're not running through gaps on the line right now. You're not getting anything up the middle other than a yard or two. Does Dejon change that? I don't know, but a lot of our run plays, they're happening on the perimeter. We're headed outside, and we're successful at it right now. So if that can continue, good. But we still have to be able to keep things from being one-dimensional. We have to be able to run the football, and I'm curious to see if we can do that. Now, should we also, on defense, looking at one other side of the ball, we should hopefully be able to start kind of getting through the line as well. That's one other thing that I want to see defensively. Can we get through the line and sack Spencer Rattler in this game as well? I don't know. That's one of the things I want to see, because I do think that other teams have already had success in doing that against Spencer Rattler. Spencer Rattler is a good football player. Again, late in the season last year, he really showed shine and a Heisman potential player late into the season. Early on, he did not. And he's not necessarily showing it right now, but he's not looking bad either. Through 2 games, this is what he looks like. Almost 700 yards through the air, averaging about 11 yards per attempt, and his percentage is almost 85%, with only 3 touchdowns through the air, which last year I think it took him like 5 games before he ever even got a touchdown through the air. So it took him a lot longer to get to this point last season. He's not really getting a lot through the air, but really we're not either. When I look at it, Carson Beck's 577, 3 touchdowns and an interception. Spencer Rattler has not thrown any interceptions yet, but I think on that offensive line, Georgia's defensive line should be able to wreak havoc in this game, should be able to wreak havoc, bust through, and create havoc plays, not only rushing the quarterback, hopefully making some incomplete passes from him, but also possibly getting turnovers out of that. That helped a lot last week in that second quarter, kind of explosion of offensive points, but also, defense kind of giving us a lot of that, which is sometimes what it takes in football games. That could be what it takes in this game as well. So I'm curious to see how things kind of shake up in that as well. I did want to bring up, let's look at the keys to the game that I've got on tap for this week. Here we go. If you guys can see it on screen here, watching on YouTube. Offensively, I want to see some deep shots. And some of this is let's start to open up the playbook a little bit. I understand why we have not yet. I understand that hey, we've played a UT Martin. We have played a Ball State. We have played 2 teams that if you need to open the playbook against these 2 teams more than you should, there is a problem. More than you worried about winning a 3rd national championship in a row, you have bigger problems if you're having to open up a playbook against these smaller teams that you should dominate in all facets of the game without having to do so. But I would like to start to see this kind of open up a little bit. And I think by opening it up, deep shots is one of those things. I've seen a couple of different guys talking about how we've had safety looks that are just really kind of coming up in the face of our defenders, and we should be able to beat them over the top. You've got some of the fastest guys in the country, I believe, again, in Arian Smith. I'll probably say it every week that I really believe they've got the track speed to absolutely run past a defense, and Carson has to have the time back there as well to be able to hit those guys deep down the field when they get open. So that's one of the first keys that I want to see. Let's take some deep shots, start to kind of open it up. Running the ball is the second key on this, and I know that sounds silly, but again, I don't want to become one-dimensional. I don't want to become a one-dimensional football team where we are looking in every direction trying to throw the ball, but we cannot move the ball offensively on the ground. So I want to see us run the ball, and I think Dejon coming back this week, having a healthy Kendall Milton is a good way to do that. And again, possibly sliding in Dylan Bell there as well. Perimeter blocking, I touched a little bit on this earlier, having that issue last week. Let's see if we can't clean that up a little bit. And I'm sure Kirby has been harping on that all week long at practice. We've got to block better, so when we are running the ball to the outside, we have time for these guys to get into space. Even when we're doing these smaller screen plays on the edge as well, is holding that block long enough for guys to get past you. Now, not holding, but, locking on to that block long enough for your guy with the ball to get past them and continue to get yards, because there were a lot of times last week where, a guy would get hit at the line and all of a sudden it was like, okay, this is a good play. If he gets past this defender that's being blocked by a wideout on the edge, we've got a 20, 30-yard, possibly even a big play for a touchdown here, and all of a sudden we're only getting 5, 6, 7 yards out of it. Something that should be an explosive that really wasn't. Let's look at the keys defensively here now. Pass rush. I want to see this again. Offensive line for South Carolina, I don't think it's very good. I think we should have the ability to be able to get into the backfield a lot against Spencer Rattler here. So part of it I kind of wanted to put in here. This is like threefold for me. Pass rush in this one, in the fact that we should not only affect the quarterback but wreak havoc on this offense with our defense, whether it's creating those turnovers, whether it's getting sacks, whether it's just affecting the quarterback enough to where he's making bad plays or throwing the ball away a lot, getting those incompletions. So pass rush is one of the keys on this one. Secondary, so those times we're not pass rushing as well, or, Spencer Rattler's a good scrambling quarterback, not necessarily that he's scrambling and getting a bunch of yards on the ground, because he's not. I mean, so far through the season, I think he's like negative 16 yards rushing. So he doesn't have like Tim Tebow stats where he's running all over teams when he's not throwing the ball. But he is at least able to extend the pocket where he can get out of the pocket when this offensive line's not blocking for him, and he can extend a play. Not necessarily running down the field with his legs. I do think he has that potential as well, but it's when our secondary starts to kind of let guys get loose, and we lose guys. That happened a lot against Ohio State last year. Again, completely different team when you have C.J. Stroud and the guys that Ohio State did on the wideout position. So I'm not necessarily going to put this in the same vein as that, but our secondary has to be elite in understanding that, hey, if this quarterback does scramble and get out of the pocket, which I do believe he will do from time to time, we need to be able to give him the time of day, or we need to be able to stick with our wideouts in the secondary. And also just even when he's just sitting in the pocket, I want our secondary to be elite in this as well. And I think we've done really well so far in the season. Javon being out, I think that's going to be a question to see. Let's see how things go as we continue into this. And then the last thing is the trenches, battling in the trenches and winning the war on defensive line, kind of pushing through that offensive line of South Carolina, being the last in a lot of this, again, just kind of wreaking that havoc and busting through the line. And let's see if we can't get some sacks on the football game is one thing I would enjoy seeing in this one. So that's the keys to the game. I do have it predicted in this one. 42-10 is what I think the Dogs win this one by. The spread on this one's like 28 points is a lot. It's a lot Georgia's way. We'll get to the picks here in a minute, but you guys know if I ever take the points for Georgia, don't take them with me because, again, it just doesn't hit. But I was really close to thinking about adding this to my picks of the week because of that score, but I could see this being a slow start again, and I really want to stop saying that, but I can also see this an absolutely explosion in the first quarter, dominating in all aspects of the game, and Georgia being up 24-0 after the first quarter, just truly showing and opening up that playbook like I'm hoping they do, and really just jumping on top of South Carolina and making sure that everybody knows, hey, Georgia's had a couple of slow starts, but no, not anymore. It's time for us to show you guys what we can do. And everybody kind of sits back and goes, okay, yeah, that's still the Georgia team that we thought they were going to be coming into the season. And don't doubt that the Dogs are still here. And I just hope that's what we see. I think if South Carolina's smart, their smart play on this one is to hold the football. Don't be like a Tennessee trying to run a bunch of plays really quickly, and then all of a sudden you run into 3 and outs in 2 minutes of having the football. No, I think it's hold on to the football. Do what Ball State did last week and limit possessions for Georgia. That's how you limit the points against you. And the more time that you give your offense on the field, you're having to. I mean, it's kind of a tit for tat, really, because then you're having to deal with Georgia's defense, and that's not very fun either. So I think that's the only way South Carolina can make a football game of this is limit Georgia's possessions and keeping that time of possession in their favor as far as South Carolina goes. So, but regardless, I think it's 42-10. I think the Dogs roll in this one pretty easily. And we'll see how things go. Some of the other big games that are going on around the country this week, we have a couple of games that are actually going on right now. You have, it looks like Bishop Sycamore playing Miami. I mean, it's Bethune-Cookman, but playing nobody, and I can't say anything because we've started the season the same way. This week, I know a lot of people have complained about, man, there's not really any huge games going on this weekend. Hey, there's football. That's all I care about. It can be nobody. Again, week 0, I was watching Vandy and Hawaii, and it was like, I don't care who wins this football game, but it's football. I will watch high school football on a Friday just because it's football. So glad to have football back. That's the big part of it. Navy and Memphis playing this week. One of the weird ones is Alabama at South Florida. That one kind of made me go, That's interesting because when I first saw it, I was like, okay, South Florida's playing Alabama, and then I was like, wait. Alabama's going to South Florida. Don't really get that one, but I'm not supposed to, so it's not a big deal to me. BYU traveling to Arkansas, that's going to be a good one. Central Michigan and Notre Dame, Colorado State, that's where game day is going to be if you care about it. Florida State at Boston College, Fresno State, Arizona State, Southern playing at Wisconsin. Shout out to the Southern Eagles up there. Georgia Tech at Ole Miss, Hawaii at Oregon. Let's see, Iowa State at Ohio. I don't think that's Ohio State, though. I think that's the other. Kansas State at Missouri. That'll be a good one, too. LSU at Mississippi State. There's a couple of these that I think are going to be kind of tight and much better games than we anticipate, too. Louisville, Indiana. Again, I've got a huge sheet right here. I'm trying to look at the bigger ones instead of some of these others. But some of these small games turn out to be good games, too. Northwestern at Duke. Oklahoma, Tulsa, Penn State, Illinois. Some of these games I wouldn't sleep on. Pitt at West Virginia. I think that could be a good one, too. San Diego State. I thought that was San Jose State. They're at Toledo. Georgia, South Carolina. Again, you guys know that already. Tennessee at Florida. That's going to be a bigger one than I think people think. TCU at Houston. Tulane at Southern Miss. Vandy and Nevada, Las Vegas. Again, not necessarily the week that makes you just go, man, we've got some great games. Yeah, Ohio State's Western Kentucky. I had that backwards. Western Michigan at Iowa and Wyoming at Texas. Utah also in Weber State. The weekly picks on that, let's go ahead and jump right into it real quick. I've kind of gone a little bit more bold on the weekly picks this week just because I like to. I want my record to be great, but at the same time, I think sometimes it's good to kind of just take a little bit of a leap of faith, and that's really not what this is. It's just some picks. It's not a big deal. Anyways, Georgia over South Carolina, what I've got here. So far, last week went 3-3 like I told you guys. I'm 8-5 so far overall. Not too bad. I mean, it's okay. It's a winning record. We'll see. We could do better. Let's see if we do. I'm taking a gamble on this week, some of these picks. Georgia over South Carolina. As you can see there, I'm not taking the points, so that's probably a good thing. But Georgia over South Carolina. Tennessee at Florida. This is a big one. Tennessee at Florida. I've got Tennessee winning this one at Florida, and Tennessee is a 6.5-point favorite. I think this is, it's a slow start against Austin Peay last week. Tennessee didn't necessarily look good. Florida has not looked good at all so far this season. But Tennessee only 6.5 at Florida, I don't see. I really don't care how loud the swamp is. I don't care what's going on down there. I think Tennessee is a better football team than Florida, and definitely a touchdown better football team than Florida. So I hate to say it. If they could both lose, that'd be awesome, but they can't, so somebody's got to win. But if I want the picks to be good, hey, I'm taking Tennessee, and I'm also taking them in that 6.5 points. Then we got LSU at Mississippi State. These next two games are a couple of games where I was like, I could really see this kind of going either way. Not necessarily from a who's going to win the game standpoint, but more of like a point standpoint. So LSU at Mississippi State. I'm taking LSU in this game, but I'm taking Mississippi State plus 9.5. Mississippi State plus 9.5. I feel like they're at home. Again, I think that they're a better football team than most people think that they are. And I feel like this is a chance for them to play a really good game at home against LSU and just keep this one a little bit tighter. So give me Mississippi State plus 9.5 in this one. Again, I put these odds in on generally Tuesday or Wednesday. These numbers may be a little bit different than what you guys are looking at right here, right now. But for the most part, they're usually within a point at least, unless something major has happened and there's been a big swing of money. But LSU, I'm taking them for the win, but give Mississippi State plus 9.5 there with the points. Then we got Georgia Tech at Ole Miss. This is another one. Ole Miss, I think, is going to win pretty easily against Ole Miss in this one, but 19.5, that's a pretty big number. That's a pretty big number, and I don't think Georgia Tech has necessarily played terrible so far starting the season, So give me Georgia Tech plus that 19.5. I think this is a game. Again, last week Ole Miss kind of playing around with Tulane. Not really playing around. It was a good game. They beat them by 10. I could see Ole Miss absolutely thumping Georgia Tech, and I look back and go, man, they beat them by 35. What was I thinking? But I could also see this as a game coming off of a tough game last week. You're back at home. You got Georgia Tech, who's a scrappy team at times, that comes into this one and tries to keep it a little bit closer, in the 18, 17-point range. But give me Ole Miss with the win, but I'm taking Georgia Tech plus the 9.5, which is hard to say because it's Georgia Tech. So that's the week 3 picks there. Give me the Dawgs over South Carolina. Tennessee over Florida. Give me Tennessee with the points. 2, LSU over Mississippi State, but give me Mississippi State in the points. And then I got Ole Miss over Tech, but give me Tech in the points. Let's see if we can't kind of not turn things around, because nothing's wrong so far on the year. Everything's going okay. Last but not least, let's talk about the top 5, because I did finally get the graphic in here. This is my top 5 going into this week 3 slate. I got Georgia at the top, FSU second, Texas at third, Michigan fourth, and USC at fifth. Let's see how things change up. I think I'm going to keep up with this all year long and do my top 5 throughout the season and just kind of see how things shake out as the season goes on. So we've got the weekly picks. We've got the preview. We got the Dawgs on tap on CBS at 3:30 coming up this weekend. I'm fired up about it. I know you guys are too. If you guys don't mind, if you guys are watching on YouTube, make sure you hit the like button. Again, that just kind of helps keep the show rocking and rolling, and it keeps you guys engaged with it as well. If you guys want to leave a comment as well, share it. If you guys are into sharing it and you are like, hey, I kind of enjoy how this guy does his show, share it. I'd greatly appreciate it. That is the way we get the show out to people. If you guys are listening on podcast, make sure that you hit the 5-star, whether it's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you guys listen. We're on any platform you could possibly think of, iHeartRadio. Give us that rating and review there. I greatly appreciate it. Again, just grows the show. And if you guys want to support the show, don't have anything extra for you right now, but go to Patreon/Dawg Talk. Go to that link. All links in the description of the podcast, and support the show. I greatly appreciate it. But Dawgs against South Carolina this weekend, 3:30. Let's see if we can't take care of business. I'll check in with you guys afterwards. Go Dawgs.